Hey everyone, welcome to Northern Aeronautical. My name is McCoy, and it has been a long time since I've had to say that phrase. Obviously, I've been pretty inactive for the last almost 2 years now on this YouTube channel. I've been a little more active on my Twitter, but nowhere near, and totally not on my Instagram. But I just got back from college for my first semester, and unfortunately, due to some medical reasons and whatnot, I'll have the next semester off. So I got a lot of time on my hands, and to keep myself busy and my mind off some things, I've decided to start back up some rocketry projects. I've been pretty burnt out in the last 2 years. I haven't gotten a ton done, but I have gotten some projects continued, a lot more than I've shown on my YouTube. But I kept it relatively up to date on my Twitter, so if you want more details of any projects, there's plenty of that on my Twitter. But other than that, I just want to quickly try to get through everything I've done, very summarized. I don't know how long it's going to take. There's a lot to cover, and I want to really compress it down. But the first thing is the last videos that I had uploaded on YouTube were the Vatira reveal and then the Mercury Flight 4 and 5. So flight-wise, there was one more Mercury flight. Unfortunately, I never quite fixed the whole becoming a missile issue that all the other Mercury rockets experienced in those videos. So I had one more flight, became a missile, was a little better, but I couldn't quite fix the issues yet. So the next evolution of that was Mercury V2, and that had 2 flights, and those went totally way better, like significantly better. Probably the biggest improvement was I switched to a custom flight computer. Instead of on a perf board, I designed and ordered a custom PCB, and that's going to be this guy right here. So again, there's a lot more of this on my Twitter if you want to see more photos of these things. But that is the Mariner series of flight computers, and that was the second one I made, and the third one in total. So before that, there was this one, but this thing sucked, and I absolutely hate it, and I hate having to see it. But then I went to Mariner MK3, and this little guy worked pretty darn well. Unfortunately, the pyro channels didn't work. But the biggest improvement over the previous just custom PCB boards I had used for the other Mercury flights was that I had the gyroscope flushly mounted against the flight computer, and that prevented a whole lot of issues of under acceleration, it bending slightly. And then in the code, I fixed the calibration problems I was having, so it didn't pitch over like the Mercuries did, or the V1s did. So V2 went pretty well. First flight, it was on too weak of a motor. I didn't quite take into account how much heavier it was, and it didn't fly very high, but it was stable nonetheless. The second flight, much more powerful motor, but unfortunately the parachutes did not deploy, and it completely shattered in impact, and so that was the end of the Mercury series. And then that brings us to the Vatira, and that was my last video. I did a trailer for it, and in the end I did show a single shot of it launching. So Vatira had, let me make sure I get this right, 4 flights. Yes, 4 flights. So the first 2, they all went pretty well except the last one. First one went well. Parachute did deploy that time. There were some things, it wasn't perfectly stable. It wasn't quite as stable as the previous Mercury flight. But the parachute deployed, and I was able to recover the rockets, so that was already an improvement there. Second flight went pretty darn well too. It was way more stable, and parachute didn't deploy. So I have a lot of parachute issues. Then the third one, it went well, was very stable. I think it was within plus or minus 10 degrees, which isn't perfect and definitely not good by TVC standards anymore. But I'm pretty happy with the results. But the parachute also failed to work. It deployed, but the shock cord snapped, and that's on me for using a rubber band as a shock cord instead of proper materials. But material went pretty well for the V1s. Those were all the V1s. And then I had V2. I never uploaded anything about the V2, even on my Twitter. And that was my last rocketry project I've really done. So that one, I made a whole bunch of improvements. I made a new flight computer for that, and that would be Venera MK2. And it's a pretty good flight computer. It's designed to mount horizontally in the rocket instead of vertically. And I did that because how I mounted it, I had a vibration dampening system, and then I just thought it was better to have the gyroscope in its like meant to be orientation, even though it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that went pretty darn well. It's a great flight computer. I went to an Itsy Bitsy for M4, that's what it's called. Itsy Bitsy M4 for the microcontroller. A lot more powerful than the Teensy I had been using. So that was an improvement. So that flight did not go well whatsoever. I still have no idea quite what went wrong. It was very windy, and I had go fever, and I really wanted to fly it, and so I launched it when I probably shouldn't have. It was way too windy. I thought the wind died down for a second. I was like, okay, let's send it, and well, the wind or something threw it very out of control, and that thing pitched over, crashed, got pretty broken up. And the data logging, for some reason, logged 2 lines of data in the entire instance, and I have no idea why that is. It should have logged 100 lines at the speed the microcontroller was running at. So I don't know if there was an issue, maybe browning out, or something stopped the flight computer from maybe operating, and that's why it did what it did, and then also with the wind it went out of control. So the parachutes, of course, didn't get the chance to even deploy, and so again, parachute issues. Other than TVC, I have had some other rocketry things. So Cameron and I, we did our certification flights for our L1s, and his rocket went great. His rocket looks wonderful, and there's an Ice-T design. Mine was the AMRAAM 120, and it didn't go well. The parachute didn't deploy. I hate how many times I have to say parachute didn't deploy, but yeah, it got stuck and it crashed into the ground very fast, and now it's on my wall in shambles. But that pretty much covers all my rockets. Some other things I've done is for the launch pad, I made a custom flight computer for that, and this thing is pretty good. 3 relays for various pyro controls. Has a whole suite of other things it can do, including a spot for a HX711 amplifier, and that will allow me to use it to like do load cell test fires if I want to do any more custom rocket motors. And it also is radio controlled, so instead of having a super long wire that sucks to have to roll up and take care of and make sure all the connections are right for launch, it's just a separate radio controller, and it's so much nicer. I'm thinking about upgrading it. I'm not quite sure. There's some things I'd like to improve. Rocket motor wise, speaking of load cell test fire data, I've done quite a lot of motor test fires of all sorts of different motors within that 2-year span. And I think I was pretty up to date on the Twitter. So if you're curious what those were, they're on there. There's probably quite a few that aren't on there either. I've made so many, I lose track, and most of them blew up anyways. But I did make a pretty nice test stand for them, thinking I'd start really getting into them. And the NE7, test fired that on that, worked great, good motor. I was pretty happy with that. I haven't done anything with it since. But that pretty much brings us up to speed to now. So the last Vatira flight, V2, was my last ever project really I worked on. And so now, that was about a year ago from now. And since then, senior year of high school, college applications and whatnot, and then I worked over the summer, and I was just kind of burnt out with rocketry, so I didn't have a whole lot going on at the time, rocketry-wise, and nothing whatsoever in any other sort of developments, projects. And then I moved all the way to Florida for college. I went to Embry-Riddle. I'm in Washington State, so literally across the country. So I was there for the last semester. I got to see SLS fly, so that was pretty cool. But like I mentioned before, due to some reasons and some happenings, I'm back home for this semester. And until next fall, I have not much to do. So I've really put a lot of rocketry projects on my plate to really keep my mind off some things and to keep myself busy. So the first thing I want to show is probably the new flight computer I'm putting together. That thing is so much more advanced than anything else I've made. So I have two right here, and they are full SMD, and they use a Raspberry Pi 2040, and it's a great little microcontroller that is packs a punch for its cost and size and whatnot. And this flight computer has a lot of features. So right here I have two. One of them is meant for, right now I have the microcontroller set up, and it works great. And then the other one is for me testing the power supply distribution part, and they're the same flight computer. I just started one half of the board, the bottom half on one and then the top half on the other, because I didn't want to have them interfere while I was making it, and possibly if I shorted one side then it would fry the microcontroller, or I did something wrong on the top side and it somehow damaged the stuff down below for power supply. So eventually, I haven't quite finished putting them all together. I'm really close. So far everything's worked, and I don't have a whole lot more I need to do. So that was a really fun project. It took a lot of time to design. I really enjoyed it though. Tons of components. I believe a total of 107, and then it is a 4-layer, so it's a little more clean compared to routing a 2-layer PCB. So the improvements on this one compared to something like the Venera MK2 is that I'm utilizing, it's fully SMD to begin with, and there's not a whole lot of upsides to that. Just an off-the-shelf microcontroller that you just make a shield for is it works pretty well, but I just kind of wanted to challenge myself, have some fun making a fully SMD. It's just kind of nice to have your own microcontroller design instead of using something else off the shelf. It's much more tailored to your needs, and it is cheaper per unit, though overall making everything for a full SMD is way more expensive. But improvements over the last flight computer is going to be the gyroscope and the pressure sensor. So the sensor suite is a huge improvement. Instead of using the MPU 6050, which is pretty hated amongst the rocketry community, I switched to the BMI 088, which is super common. People like it. I didn't mind the MPU 6050. I thought it worked pretty well, but the BMI 088 is undeniably better, and I was able to get them for a good price, so I decided to go with that now. and that's also full SMD, so I'm not using a separate PCB bot like the MP6050 comes in. So that's another upside. And then the pressure sensor, BMP388, and it's not super impressive, and it's definitely not the best you can get. I could spend a couple bucks more per unit and I could get a better one, but it has, I want to say 0.5 plus or minus 0.5 meter accuracy, and that is more than enough for what I need. I don't need super high precision barometric readings. I'm not doing anything for that, at least not for a while. If I come up with some need for it, and I'll just make a new flight computer for that. Other than that, it has a SD port for an SD. It has 2 pyro channels, and I'm crossing my fingers the pyro channels work. I have a history of burning MOSFETs instead of making functional pyro channels. So crossing my fingers, I haven't tested them yet, but I'm hoping they work. And that gives me 2 pyro channels. It also has a plug-in port for an NRF module if I wanted to do radio communication. Currently I don't have any plans for that, but it's a nice feature. It has a buzzer. I switched to a buck converter for power, and it has a whole bunch of LEDs, and no reason for that functionality wise. I just thought it'd be nice to have a whole bunch of LEDs that display different functionality. And so far they're working. And then it has 6 PWM ports for servos, or maybe an ESC if I'm doing some other projects. I have some other ideas I might do an ESC for. So yeah, that is my current big project, is this flight computer, Manor MK6. And that is, of course, going to then be put into a TVC rocket. Quick update from post-recording me. I did end up finishing the Mariner MK6 and fully assembling it. At the time of recording previously, it was only about halfway done. But I have one unit completely soldered up, and so far it's working great. In the video, I said I hadn't tested certain things such as the MOSFETs, servo channels and whatnot, but so far everything's working great. The only thing I have yet to test is the sensors, so just the BMP and the BMI, but other than that, board's working great. So just a quick update from the information I had said in the previous recording. And I am also working on designing a new TVC rocket, so instead of continuing with Tira, I'm deciding to bring back the Mercury name, and I am making Mercury V3. So this is the current amount I have printed out. It's just meant for testing, really. This is the main fuselage, and I'm probably going to use this. This is the TVC cannon. I will be using this one. I'll be making a new one. But it is printed out of foam PLA, so it's about 50% lighter. It's a little weaker, but I was able to make up for that lack in strength by just adding some internal structure, and it's still way lighter and stronger for probably what I would have made otherwise. So that's going to make it lighter. Before I fly that, I have a Ranger rocket starting to get designed. I haven't made a Ranger in a long time. The last one failed when the rocket motor I made and it exploded. But this one is going to use a commercial motor. It's not for testing rocket motors like the old ones were. And this is just going to be a conventional finned rocket, and that's what I have here is the fin can. It's also foam, and it's fully 3D printed in one part. And then I have a cardboard fuselage. I'm just skipping the whole 3D printed fuselage part. I didn't feel like doing it this time. And this is the lower half. The upper half is 3D printed, and it has a spot for the new flight computer. And essentially the whole idea is I just want to launch it, get some data, just see how well the flight computer works, get some idea of what kind of data I'm going to be seeing, just make sure it completely works before I put it into a rocket that is very likely to not work and to crash into the ground, and I don't feel like losing all of that money if it potentially breaks the flight computer. So I just want to test it first. And so that covers pretty much everything I've been up to. I got a new 3D printer, an Aquila S2, and this is a much better printer compared to the Ender 3. I replaced my Ender 3 with it. And it's direct drive, full metal hot end, so I can use all sorts of filaments. I got upgraded my soldering station, so now I have a better reflowing unit, and that's been super helpful for soldering. And the last thing I was going to go over is the new launch pad I'm putting together. So I have it mostly catted out now. It has a lot more features compared to the last one. I won't get into those. I'll save that for some other time. But I'm pretty happy with how it's coming out so far, and it's definitely a major improvement over my last launch pad. My launch pad it's been long due for a replacement, and it's very heavy, made out of some thick, inch thick 2 by, shoot, I don't remember. But anyways, it's heavy, and it doesn't have a whole lot of features. It's just a chunk of wood that is meant to have a rocket launch off of it. It has nothing launch pad specific. So I'm making a new launch pad that can accommodate some more things, make my life easier. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot of other things I'm doing. That covers everything. I'm going to be under Northern Aeronautical, and I'll be uploading on Instagram from now on. I've decided not to use Twitter. At least I don't think I'm going to be. Probably won't be. That might change, who knows. But it's still up if you want to look back at our old projects. And like I said before, a lot of the stuff I discussed from what I did in the last 2 years is going to be on there in a lot more in-depth detail on some things. So if you're curious about that, that's all still up. I won't remove it or anything. I just don't feel like using Twitter. But I'll be active on Instagram. And I've been trying to be active on it recently, kind of updating on the flight computer, the rocket for it, and just everything I can, just to keep it active. And then I'll be uploading YouTube videos, hopefully, depending on how much time I have. I should have plenty of time, but how lazy I am, depending on to make the video. But yeah, so that covers everything from the last 2 years. I really jammed a lot in, unfortunately, a pretty long video still. And then also covers what I'm working on now, and that is what you'll be expecting to see from this rocketry project channel, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's what you'll be seeing in the coming months. Thank you for watching.